So this week we're going to learn about analog photography as opposed to digital photography, which is most of what photography is today. So analog photography includes primarily, we think about it as the silver halide and the color photography that were completely dominated photography until very, very recently. But it also includes a number of other light sensitive processes. And what we're going to do this week, since we can't go into the dark room and print negatives there, we are going to play at home with a wonderful, very, very old process called cyanotype. Cyanotypes were actually invented in the 19th century, soon after silver halide photography was invented, and I'll talk a little more about that in the slideshow. This is a cyanotype that I made. Now, cyanotypes are not, what we're going to be doing is a cyanotype photogram, and that's what this is. And they're technically not photographs because there was no camera involved. How this was made was just a coated paper laid in the sun with a piece of lace over it, and it just recorded the outline of the lace. And this is essentially what you'll do. It's called a photogram, and it is, however, one of the very earliest ways that photographic inventors and artists were experimenting with light-sensitive materials. So it has this kind of classic cyanotype. Blue, that is cyan, and that's why we call it the cyanotype. That also has to do with the chemicals that make it up. The chemicals, by the way, are potassium ferrocyanide and ferric ammonium citrate. Now, don't let that scare you. This is a very low toxic process, especially in the way that we do it. I want to show you one other, while I talk a little bit more about this process and then show you how to do it. This is another cyanotype I made. Now, the cyanotypes that I'm showing you right now, I actually mixed these from a liquid chemical process. It's a two-part process. I painted that cyanotype formula onto the paper, which is why you see these brush strokes. In this one, I actually laid some old-fashioned black and white negatives. These are fairly large format over the top of the paper. So I actually made little blue photographs. So totally possible to make photographs with this if you have some negatives, but not necessary for the assignment. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and talk about the process. The process is super simple. You want to gather together a bunch of materials. I suggest that you try two different versions. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to work. And one version, you're going to work with materials that are very, very flat. That is, that you can squeeze under a piece of glass and get them really tight to the image. The other one, though, will experiment with some more dimensional items. So here I have some flat items. I have some feathers. I have some lace. This is the same lace I used to make the other one. I have a leaf, and I have a bit of this crumpled up plastic. There's other things you can use. Oh yes, I forgot. I have a negative. So I'm going to go ahead and put those onto a piece of cyanotype paper and work with it. And then when I come back, I'll actually also show you how to work with some more dimensional items. So what I like to do, I'm just going to clear this off. I'm just going to take this tablet of paper, and this is just to have a base to work with. I'm just going to put that down, and I'm going to go ahead and make just lay out my materials just to get an idea of what they're going to look like. This is not the cyanotype paper, so I don't have any light sensitive material yet. And I'm going to put them each in their own spot so we can see how they all behave. There we go. That lace, I think I might pull it off to the corner because I also want to make sure that I put in, these negatives. These are smaller negatives than the ones in the sample I showed you, but you'll see that they will give us actually a positive image, which is cool. So if you have any of those around, that's good. I'm going to keep it simple. That's all I'm going to do. So now I'm going to take my cyanotype paper out. When you break it out, you're going to see it's in this black bag. Don't pull it out and leave it out. You want to keep the sheets that you haven't used inside the bag. So I'm just going to open it up, take out one sheet, and before I even get started, I'm going to go ahead and zip this closed and fold it under and make sure it's safe. Now, the cyanotype paper, when you take it out, is going to be very green, and that's normal. That is the actual ferric acids that are in here. And then I'm just going to slide it under my materials. And I think I'll do this because I know that this is going to give it a little bit of lift. And I want these things to be as tight as possible down onto the paper. Okay. Now, there are very special tools that we use when people who are very serious about cyanotype, they have frames where they can really tighten it down. But all you really need is just any kind of a piece of glass. I'm just going to press that down, make sure things are pretty close to that glass. And any piece of glass will do, or plexiglass. You don't have to have the glass over the top of it. It's fine, but it will give you a tighter, nicer print. Okay, so now that I've got that set up, I'm going to take it outside. I have a little table set up. I'm going to put it into as full sun as possible. You don't have to have it in sunshine. Overcast days are fine, but it might take you a little longer. The directions on this pack say 10 to 15 minutes. I would always encourage you to go longer, and I'm probably going to do about 30 minutes. So as soon as that's done, I will show you what it looks like when we're done developing it and how to finish it off. Okay, I've gone out and I've retrieved the cyanotype. I bumped it just a tiny bit as I was carrying it in, so you can already see what's going on. So you notice that the paper is now a pretty dark, rich blue, and it'll get even darker after we process it. I'm going to go ahead and take these off here so you can see basically what's going on. Now, so this looks really good, because the negative might not have been really super flat on there, I don't know how clear the images will be, but let's go develop it and find out. So one of the things that we love about cyanotype is that it's a very easy process to develop. We just need a tray of plain water. We want it to be running water, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in unrunning for a little bit just so you can hear me talk about this. This is a very low toxicity process, especially when you get the pre-prepared paper. I still would clean out the sink, make sure there aren't any dishes in there, and don't keep your hands stuck in it. But you'll see that as soon as we put it into the water, a couple things happen. You'll see the images start to pop up. The areas that are less exposed are going to get brighter. They're going to turn a very bright green initially, and then eventually it's going to get white, and that's what we're waiting for. You also see the background lightens just a little bit as it goes in, and eventually that's going to darken down again. Cyanotype takes a little bit of time. So what you want to do, this is a photo tray, by the way. You want to either just leave this running or just empty it out and start again, but keep that water running continuously. About 10 minutes, you want to make sure that all of this green color to the image disappears. I mean, this is true of all light-sensitive photographic processes, that what you're doing really is just removing, it's what we call fixing, really. In this process, we fix and develop at the same time, but it's removing the light-sensitive material that's on the surface so that this will stay light-fast. If we didn't do this process, the image that you saw would gradually, in an hour or so, it would just disappear. But because we're washing out those unexposed areas now, and they won't get exposed, the image appears. So you can see the feather, very nice process. The lace has a really nice distinct look. The negatives are not as distinct as they could be because we don't have the glass was not quite secure or flat to it. The flatter you can make the image, the more you can flatten it down to the surface of the paper, the clearer that image will be. And so if you get a heavier piece of glass, a very flat back, that will help. But I'm pretty happy with this. I'm just going to let this run. Empty out the tray one more time. And by the way, this is a photo tray. It's meant specifically for this process. You don't have to have a photo tray. You can use any kind of a plastic or glass tray. Don't use metal. It can just be a dish pan or a dish tray or anything like that. And so I'm just going to let it run for about 10 minutes, and then we'll lay it out to dock, and when it's dry, we'll take another look. Meanwhile, while we let that dry, I'm going to show you how to do a different kind of cyanotype with dimension material. So I want to make another Cyantotype photogram, but this time I'm going to use dimensional items. So I can't put the glass over the top of it. I'm going to put the glass underneath. Now, this process works best. You can experiment with whatever you'd like, but this process actually, I'm just going to throw these things on here and then we'll get the paper out. This works the best when you have items that maybe have a little bit of translucency, items that have a little texture like this bubble wrap, shiny things like a pair of scissors because that tends to bounce the light around a little bit. I've never done this one before, but this should be interesting. It actually has a little bit of translucency. It's also pink though, which means that it may block the UV light rays. So these are all just experiments. I also have a light reel. So I'm just going to put the paper underneath here, just like I did before. But I'm going to put it on top of the glass and just carry that whole thing out there. Again, just like I did before. I'm going to go ahead and grab out that new piece. There we go. That's the correct side. And just lay these on. And I'm going to carry it up very carefully because I don't want to drop things on the ground. This is a little duck mandible film. Okay, let's see what that's like. Let's take a look at the three-dimensional version. It's right now it seems a little subtle. I'm hoping that as we develop it, more things will come out. So let's just see. I'm going to go ahead and plunge it in the water. I changed it a little bit from when I did the demo video because I took one out and immediately things started flying off. So I added some objects to help things stay in place. So this is the film reel. These are the scissors. This is the little duck skull, and it looks like it might have been a little bit too far away from the paper, but let's see if it develops a little bit more. And then over here, well, I'm not sure they're going to come out, but let's give it some time. I had some plastic wrap, and I put down a little metal tool to hold things down, and a little bit of plastic over here. But I'm not sure it's going to come out. And again, this is just a lot of practice in time. This is the crystal, which is actually pretty interesting. Let's go ahead and rinse that out and see. Now, as I develop it more, because I remember on one that I did earlier that it seemed as if the plastic wrap had entirely, or the bubble wrap had entirely disappeared, and then it re-emerged a little bit later. Let's go ahead and turn that off so you can hear me talk. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm going to give it a few more minutes in here. We're starting to see a little bit of the plastic wrap come back here. The duck mandible, kind of disappointing, but the film reel and the scissors are pretty cool. I especially like the film reel. You see how we got some nice bounce in the light. So, just another experiment with 3D objects. I would really suggest maybe cutting your paper up into smaller portions so you can go outside and test them. Keeping in mind this process, because we do it in the sun, it is very, very changeable. And so if the sun changes in intensity, you're going to get different exposures. And the key to it really is just to experiment and have fun and make enough that you come up with something that you're kind of intrigued by. So I want to share with you the final versions of these cyanotypes, give you a couple more bits of information. So I let this dry overnight, and you can see this is the flat materials. And you can see probably the first thing you're noticing is that the blue here is much deeper. And there are ways to make it deeper yet. One of them is hydrogen peroxide. Unfortunately, because of COVID, there is no hydrogen peroxide to be had. But you can see that just going overnight, this is a much deeper, richer blue than it was before. This is actually a classic kind of cyanotype blue, my personal favorite. One of the things to notice about this process, especially if we don't have like a super tight, what we call a contact frame, is that the things that are, even with the glass, things that are pulling away a little bit from the paper are going to have blurred edges. Things that sit really tight on the paper, like right down here, are going to be much more focused. So you can see the lace was very flat on the paper. The negative, I thought I had it tight, but it bowed up just a little bit. The edges are nice and sharp, but the images in the negatives are sort of blurred out. It's kind of a cool effect, and that's one of the things with this process, because it's experimental, that it's nice to just sort of let things happen, see what happens. Okay, let's take a look at my final version of the dimensional. Now, I changed this up quite a bit because I was experimenting with the materials, and I decided to do one last final one with a few other items. So let me just describe it. Some of them you haven't seen, but this is the film reel. You remember that. The scissors I opened up because I realized it would be nice to get more dramatic shape. And I added in just a couple of things. I added in a bracelet. You can see it's hitting the paper more closely there. This is actually a shark's tooth, a little bit of a disappointment because you don't get those edges. And then this is a pair of old wireframe glasses. These are all just rose petals that I just threw just for some texture and some fun. So I was pretty pleased with that. I think I really love the scissors and the reel. I think it'd be nice if I could figure out a way to get the exposure a little different and pull up the glasses. So just some ideas of what you can do. Now I want to show you a couple of these other ones. These aren't really finished prints, but these are some of the toning things that you can do. I went ahead and experimented with what I had available. This is an interesting one. I'd never tried it before. So this is TSP. TSP is a little chemical you can get to clean your walls before you paint. It's really a kind of a salt. And it turns this was a rich dark blue. You might remember me pulling it out of the bath. And it turns it completely this very light yellow. It's kind of interesting. It's awfully delicate, and you really lose a lot of the image. After I did that, I had never, let's put this one behind. I had never done that before, so I thought I would experiment a little bit. I cut up another print that I wasn't that great so that I could play with it. And these, I did that same TSP, but I just sort of dunked it in for shorter and shorter periods of time. And I finally came up with this, which I thought was kind of interesting. It did lighten the blue quite a bit, and there may be ways to bring that back. But I thought it was kind of intriguing to have the yellow and the blue together. So that's if you have some TSP around, that's something that you can experiment with. The other thing that I did was to play with some black tea. Now, this I've always had mixed feelings about. I've tried this before, but after letting this dry overnight, it's kind of interesting. You notice it really, really darkens and warms the darker areas. I'm not sure what happened here. I think I had a little air bubble, so it didn't quite develop. One of the things about the tea is that it also stains the white, and it's pretty hard to pull that out. So you end up with your white areas being quite brown, or the color of the tea. But that can be kind of interesting. So there you have several examples of both just doing a straight cyanotype, just working with dimensional or flat materials. I haven't even touched all the possibilities here, as well as a few different ways that you can play with these and into other chemicals that are safe household chemicals, and just play with them. Other things you can use, if you look online, you'll see a lot of different suggestions. Coffee, if you have it, hydrogen peroxide. So there's lots of different ways that you can play with this medium. This is a play week. All you have to do is just get a few of these done, get a couple of final versions of flat and dimensional materials, and if you want for a really high grade, do some of these extras, play with some toning or play with some different ideas. That's it. Have fun with cyanotype.